Hey everybody, back in Phase 2 with the Gnomeregan VOD review for Mage Healing. I really like this dungeon compared to BFD. Not necessarily because of mechanics or difficulty or whatever, I'm just having a lot more fun. I'm going to go into this first fight explaining what I want to do on every fight where I'm not worried about conserving mana, and you're going to see me screw it up. So the goal here is to Arcane Blast 3 times, and then pop Presence of Mind, Arcane Power, and shoot off a 4th instant Arcane Blast into Living Flame. I screw it up because I auto-queue a 4th Arcane Blast instead of just casting it instantly, so it kind of messes up my rotation. I get a little disoriented, but the rest of this fight is super straightforward. Just try to kill Grubbis as fast as possible. He now despawns his ad whenever he dies. There's really not a lot of raid-wide damage going out, so you don't have to like spread regen anywhere. Just gun this guy down and move on to the next boss. Overall, I feel like the first 4 bosses in this dungeon are pretty easy as a mage healer, with the final 2 being a lot more difficult in terms of mana conservation, as well as just pure healing per second that needs to come out. So we'll kind of dive into those fights a lot more later. Boss number 2, I don't actually know his name. Viscous Fallout. This is, I think, my highest DPS fight so far in any of the raids I've done. So we do the same opening, except this time I do it correctly. 3 Arcane Blast into the instant. Now we have 4 Arcane Blast stacks. We throw off the Living Flame and just keep pumping. This is a very similar fight, actually, to the first fight. There is a bit of raid-wide damage that goes out when he spawns ads, when there's poison pools up. And it might look stressful as a mage healer if you're letting people get low, but if you are running with a second healer, they should be able to take care of a good amount of keeping people up from raid-wide damage, because it isn't this inevitable scaling thing that's going to kill them. It's just something that happens. So focus on healing your tanks, focus on doing a bunch of damage, and as you can see in this fight, I was doing an insane amount of damage. If we killed it a little bit earlier, we would have been in like the 400 DPS range. And I'm not really doing that much, right? We're just spamming Arcane Blast, using Arcane Missiles whenever it procs, and Living Flame is just doing a ton of passive damage at the start of these fights. 2 interesting things happen in this fight, one right at the beginning and then one towards the end. I space out here. I'm trying to focus on getting my opening down. I don't realize the blast is towards me. Luckily, it misses, and it hits our fellow raider. But it turns out if you get knocked into the bombs, I think the bombs stop the knockback so you don't die. So Horseradish, even though he got hit, he did not fly off the platform. This fight overall is, again, pretty straightforward. The cogs come out. Sometimes you have to move. I try to be as conservative as possible with movement. If I see like a cog moving towards me, I just kind of let it happen. And normally I don't get hit. They change direction. It's not a problem. In the second part of this fight, the boss uses a claw attack, and I'm guessing some of you guys in your raids are wondering how you're supposed to heal the person after that, because it feels like they get one shot. Well, that mechanic is an accident. So what you're supposed to do, which is what I just do right now, is if you are the claw target, go to your main tank. The one shot that he does normally comes in if the person highest on his threat is not within range after the claw kind of grabs you. But if he is, you're not going to get auto-attacked, you're not going to die, you're just going to take a decent amount of damage over time, and it won't be a problem. So on Crowd Pummeler, if you see anybody get the claw, if you're the main tank, run to them. If you are the person getting the claw, run to your main tank. So again, my goal as a mage healer is to kind of keep the tank alive. And every now and then I can throw out an extra regen on players in the raid who I think are going to die. But overall, like total like raid-wide damage, I want my other healer to be taken care of. The alternative is I could swap to mass regen for this fight and make it really easy, because what happens is groups of 3 players are taking a ton of damage every 20 or 30 seconds. So if you want to, you can run mass regen, use it right after he uses this arc ability, heal them all up to full, totally be good. But in this fight, we accidentally pulled early, so I think we were all kind of confused and frazzled. I end up having to conserve mana a lot more than I would want on this fight. This is kind of a damage race, right? Like the faster you kill this guy, the better it's going to be long term for everybody's mana. But instead, what I end up doing is using a lot of regen, which is eating into my mana a lot more than I would want to. And I didn't have time to prep, so we have no mana jewels in my back pocket. I do have Evo. I don't want to use it. I want to use it on Menagerie. And the cooldown might be up before we get there, but basically my real goal right now was kind of get my bearings on the fight. Once we kind of got it down, we were doing the calls pretty well. I felt a little bit better. And then I think we get, especially on these longer fights, if you have Living Flame, just remember to use it on cooldown. I don't know if I'm trying to stack up to 4 Arcane Blasts or if I don't realize I have it, but I'll probably throw it out eventually. Or maybe I won't. That's one of the things you can work on if you really are focused on doing as much damage as possible. Using Living Flame on cooldown is key. It does a ton of passive DPS. I do eventually throw it out here after I realize. But yeah, the boss is... this was a little bit sloppy of a fight, and I feel like a lot of players going into Gnomer are going to have fights like this that are much longer than you normally would want them to be, that are a lot more damage going to the raid. So this fight, as opposed to the previous 3, is most likely what you guys are going to experience. And then the fight that we're about to witness, the Menagerie, is something that even with this good group of players we have, to me it is the hardest healing situation for any mage out there. So I'll be talking a bunch about how I try to play it, how our strat is on it, and how I think we can improve and I can get better at least. So for our Menagerie strategy, we have one tank on the chicken, tanked on the left side of the room, and then we have another tank on dragon and squirrel on the right side of the room. The goal being that we keep all of the other mobs away from the sheep. All of our ranged start on the sheep, and then at 75%, 50%, 25% health, the ranged have to swap off because he has a reflect on him. As a mage healer, I think I went into this running Living Flame. I thought about swapping to Arcane Surge, but instead I just have Mana Pots and Mana Jewels as well as Evocation. So this fight, why it's so mana intensive is because I am healing both tanks. I'm keeping regen up 100% of the time on both tanks, and I am attempting to basically be spamming arcane damage anytime I'm not doing that, right? The part of the difficulty of this fight is ranging your healers. You never know, if you do split the room up, if you can be in range of one tank, you might not be in range of the other. That only really matters for an arcane healer if the regeneration buff is going to fall out. So we kind of get a benefit to that where I can be positioned really anywhere as long as I can do damage to one thing, and then it'll heal whoever has the buff on him, right? So it's a pretty big boon here versus like what other healers might want to do. In this fight, I never go up to 4 Arcane Blasts, I don't think. The goal here is to conserve mana. Anytime Arcane Barrage comes up, use it. Again, keep the debuffs, or keep the regeneration buffs up on your tanks. Dodge the breaths. I feel like the Dragon Breath is pretty lenient, actually. And then what the rest of your raid is going to be doing is trying to do as much equal damage to these bosses as possible. When the dragon does, I think it's called Overload, and it does a bunch of like AoE damage, we have our melee run out, and then once he's done with that, they run back over. So we're, I think, targeting the squirrel initially. When he gets too low, we can target the dragon. When they're overloaded, all the melee can run over and target the chicken. So we're only about halfway through the fight, I think. But if you don't have mana jewels because you forgot, if you don't have Evocate up for this fight, and if you want to take advantage of like the raid mechanics, you can actually be pressing buttons. So the buttons on the machines here, even though they don't do anything as a fight mechanic, you can press them to get mana back. My only issue with that is that positioning comes into play. So if you're doing this double tank strat that's very split, and you go to press a button, you're guaranteed that one of your tanks is going to be out of range. So I save it as like a last resort type situation. And then I think maybe overall, I start to panic at the end of this fight. I am low on mana. I don't know if I evocate just because I don't know if I can spare it. But I think I do end up blinking onto one of the buttons. Like right now, one of my tanks doesn't have regen on him. And I don't know if he's getting clucked or what, but I'm definitely stressing out. All of them have gone under 25%, so none of their AoE mechanics are going to happen. We group everything up, excluding the sheep, and then we try to burn it. I don't actually need a button on this fight. In previous runs, I definitely had to go get more mana, but in this run, we all did a great job and just kind of killed it. So yeah, this is definitely the hardest fight in this dungeon as a mage healer. Keeping regeneration up on 2 tanks, worrying about where they are, worrying about your mana, all of it comes into play. Definitely my favorite fight. Also, I don't know if you know, but if you run out before the boss spawns and then he spawns and then the fight starts, you just get immediately murdered. I think they patched this. I think the boss doesn't have a massive aggro radius when he spawns now. So there's that. For the final fight, as a mage healer, my priority 100% is just keeping my tank alive. If you're in a group where somebody's telling you, oh, you should be pressing buttons or you should be taking care of bombs, tell them anybody else but you, right? Just because you're ranged doesn't mean that you're the guy to do it. It would just make this so much harder for you. We are very lucky. Our comp in BFD and in Gnomer has always been kind of wonky. We don't play meta comps, but then like it turns out they're like great for the raids. So we have 2 Metamorphosis Warlocks that just insta-target the bombs and click the buttons. So this fight, what you're going to see is a very, very easy version of the Mekkatorque fight. And it kind of shows you what you can do if you have ranged who are solely dedicated to kind of pressing these buttons, killing these bombs. The difficulty of this fight is these bombs coming out and putting degens on the ground and the raid going crazy. Everything else is pretty straightforward. We have our tank. Whenever he pops this flamethrower, just kind of kite him around the room. I'm focused on keeping our tank alive. He's taking a ton of damage. And what that turns into is basically do as much damage yourself as possible, keep regen on him as much as possible, and save your evocate for any of the phases where there's some downtime. Our warlocks are killing it on these bombs. You're basically going to see none of them affect us. That is the real difficulty of this fight. So if you guys have been having trouble doing it, think about just maybe sacrificing damage on 2 of your ranged to have them solely focus those bombs. I know a lot of people like to parse. If you do end up doing that strategy, maybe swap off each week so that one week you have your off week and then the next week you can do damage. Somebody else can take care of the bombs, but it's 100% the way to do this fight. It is night and day. And going into phase 2, this is actually the hardest part as a mage healer. He does a ton of damage in this phase, and I haven't quite figured out why. Like, I know the damage stacks off of like how many players I think in the raid have this frost debuff, but I'm not quite sure why this phase in particular he's doing a ton more damage than in phase 1 or in phase 3. So I'm trying to hold on for as much as I can do. I don't think we actually have a second healer here. I think we have a Shadow Priest. Horseradish might be doing double heals. I think Horseradish is healing. So it's me and Horseradish. Druids don't really have super direct heals either. So we're kind of lacking in this fight where he gets knocked down. This might be a situation where had we wiped here, I probably would have swapped to Chronostatic and just stored that up for when he got nuked by the Ice Punch. But we got through it. Phase 3 is supposed to be, or at least it was early on, like the phase where people would wipe. Then we discovered that you interrupt the poison and it's all good. So again, this is a phase where sometimes raid-wide damage can start creeping up on you. I would not panic, but I popped Evo. I'm at full mana. I'm really not worried. I'm just focused on keeping my tank alive. And this was the phase where our raid group kind of realized, like, oh, this is a little bit easier than we thought it was going to be. Our first 2 times that we've kind of attempted it were a little wonky. And then we ended up just kind of walking in here and just deleting all these bosses, our 3rd attempt. You have counterspell if your tank's interrupt misses, but none of that has ever happened to me yet. I don't even know the chance to miss for like one-handed yellow main attacks in these raids, just because everybody's only +2 instead of +3. But you always have that as a backup in case something goes wrong. You can interrupt once this guy hits 50. Final phase, once again, kind of gets a little hairy, where that ice attack could get your tank low. Our tank has a good amount of gear going into the raid, and he's only gotten more gear. So even though these are kind of early Gnomer raids, it's just gonna get easier the more gear everybody gets. And yeah, I think the biggest thing on this fight, I would say, is just use evocation. It kind of trivializes any mana conservation that you have to do on this fight. I don't even recreate my 2nd jewel. Honestly, doesn't matter. You guys are just gonna take this guy out, and then again in phase 3, all of the mechanics you're seeing are boss mechanics, because our warlocks are just doing such a good job at killing the bombs. This fight, when I initially came into this dungeon, it was like super chaotic. It was much harder than I thought it was. I thought Menagerie and this fight were going to be like the highest tier difficulty we'd seen yet. Not the case. All you really need to do is focus on keeping the bombs in check, and the rest of the raid has the easiest time in this dungeon. It really is just kind of a gear check outside of that, where the tank's going to be taking a ton of damage. Can you keep them up? Can your range deal with the bombs? And overall, this is, I think, our 3rd week or 4th week, or 3rd reset or 4th reset of Gnomer. I'm already feeling really good about it. I almost want to try to 1-heal it as a mage, and I could easily swap from Living Flame to Mass Regen to do more raid healing. Try to kind of push myself as a healer to see if I could just do it. I'm pretty sure we can, and I'm pretty sure you could still pump out a good amount of damage without Living Flame. But yeah, overall, loving the raid. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I will put in, once again, my LVUI below, as well as some other stuff that people have been asking for. But I've been having a great time. I think this raid is way better than BFD, in my opinion. And I'm really excited to find out what they're going to do in phase 3. So, as always, thanks everybody. Like, subscribe. I will catch you guys in the next one.